Hello there, my name is John and thanks for tuning into my channel. This video is going to be part 2 in my Christian nationalism series, where I talk about the history and implications of Christian nationalism in America and whether or not it's good for society. And in this episode, we're particularly going to be looking at the question of, is the United States of America a Christian nation or not? And when I say that, is of whether it's a Christian nation or not, I'm not like implying that the alternative to it being a Christian nation is that it's an atheist nation or something like that. I'm not like putting a dichotomy. I'm basically saying, is the United States inherently Christian? Or the alternative would be like it's a secular or a religiously neutral country. So that is what we're looking at today. So there are two sides to this debate. A lot of people say that we are a Christian nation, and then there's a lot of people that would say we're not. We're first going to be looking at the side that says that we are a Christian nation and the reasons why people say that. So some of the reasons why people say that the United States of America is a Christian nation is because of the significant cultural and historical influence that Christianity had in the early founding stages of this country. For example, a lot of the early settlers in America were Christians or belonged to certain religious groups, such as the Quakers and the Puritans, which would have identified as Christian of some sort at least. So that is one of the factors that people would say, is that like the early settlers a lot of them were mostly Christian. Another one would be that a majority of our population identifies as Christian in America today. I was recently looking at a chart, and I think this survey was done in like 2020, so it might not be accurate of our population today, but it was the most recent one I found. And it said that I think around 62% of America, or at least of American adults, identified as Christian of some sort or another. So under the giant umbrella of Christianity, which you could probably lump Catholicism and some other things like maybe Jehovah's Witness or Mormons and things like that, because they kind of, they teach about Jesus and about Christian related things, even though probably most Christians, or a lot of the more fundamentalist Christians, would say that like Catholics and Mormons and Jehovah's Witness and things like that are not true Christians. So we're just going to basically lump that all into one category. So that would make up about 62% of our population if that chart was accurate that I looked at. And then you have, I think, like around 20% or more would be unaffiliated, and then the rest of that percentage kind of is a mixture of all the different smaller, less populated religious adherents that we have here in America, such as those who adhere to Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, things like that. So that's another reason why people would say that we are a Christian nation, that the United States is a Christian nation, is because of the large population of Christians in America, that we make up the majority of this population. And then one of the other reasons is that a lot of people would say that the founding fathers were religious. Some of them were Christians, some were deists. There was a few different groups of either Christians or religious types of the founding fathers. So because of that religious influence that they had, they would say, well, because the founding fathers were religious, or some of them are Christian, well, that means that America must be a Christian nation as well, because that leads to my next point, which is that a lot of our values and morals in our legal system and in our laws, people would say that those are based on biblical values and morals, such as from the Ten Commandments and things like that, or like the golden rule, which Jesus was a big proponent of love your neighbor as yourself, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and things like that. So a lot of that is inherent in our society, or I wouldn't say inherent, but a lot of that is a big part of American culture, and then our legal system kind of favors that sort of a biblical morality system. Obviously, not going back to like the old, some of the laws like required in Leviticus and Exodus of like when to stone people for disobeying, or doing things that they're not supposed to do in ancient Judaism and stuff like that. So we're not talking about those kind of morals, but more like the Christian morals that we get from the Bible. So that's kind of a summary of why people would say that we are a Christian nation. Now we're going to look at the alternative of reasons why a lot of people would say that we are not a Christian nation. So one of the first one, which is a big one, is the constitutional foundation. So inside our Constitution, there is no mention of God, Jesus, Christianity, Christians, things like that. So the absence of those words inside the Constitution seems to indicate that we are not inherently Christian, or that Christianity is not considered like the national religion of America. And then also the First Amendment, it forbids Congress from making any laws respecting the establishment of religion or the free practice thereof. So essentially that means that Congress can't make any rules enforcing religion on anybody. Like they can't impose any religious laws on you, or restrictions, or like you have to go to this kind of church, you must be this denomination, anything like that. So Congress can't do that, and they also can't they can't make any laws that prohibit the free exercise of religion. So if you wish to be whatever religion you want to be a part of, even if it's not part of the majority, you have every right as an American citizen to be able to practice whatever religion you choose to practice. So those are some of the biggest reasons why people would say that we are not a Christian nation, and we have some more that we're going to look into. Article 6 of the Constitution prohibits any religious tests as a requirement for holding public office in the U.S. government. So basically they can't require that you make a declaration of faith, or that you identify as a Christian or as any specific denomination or religion to hold any kind of public office in the government. Another, this is a big one, and it's really interesting, some things that I found out when I was researching this. So many of the founding fathers supported the separation of church and state, which I knew that, but some of these details were a little bit interesting that I hadn't previously known about. Thomas Jefferson was one of the biggest proponents of separation of church and state, and he wrote in a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association that there would be basically insuring them, because there was concerns about the government interfering in religious matters and things like that. So this letter was ensuring them that there would be a wall of separation between the church and the state. So that was basically just to let them know, yeah, the government, in our Constitution, we are not going to be mixing politics and religion, mixing church and state, essentially. And then Thomas Jefferson was also known for drafting the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which passed into law with James Madison's help, who was also another big proponent of the separation of church and state. And this statute forbade government from compelling anyone to attend worship or any religious ceremonies. Now we're going to look a little bit more at James Madison, who was the other, probably, those two were probably the biggest proponents of the separation of church and state. Obviously, there were more than just them two, but they're probably the most well-known ones. James Madison was the principal author of the First Amendment, and he made sure that it protected the freedom of citizens to practice their religion of choice, as well as protecting them from government-imposed religion. So that's what we were talking about before in the First Amendment, where it says that the Congress can't make any laws respecting the establishment of religion or the free exercise thereof. And then James Madison was also well known for his belief that religious liberty was best preserved when the state remained neutral in religious matters. So those are some big ones when it came to the Founding Fathers. This is another interesting one with the Treaty of Tripoli, which John Adams wrote in this, who was also known as one of the Founding Fathers. He wrote in the Treaty of Tripoli that was ratified in 1797, and it specifically stated, "The government of the United States is in no sense founded on the Christian religion." So he also was not a proponent of a national religion, of Christianity being a national religion, or of the government of the United States being founded on Christian principles or on the Christian religion. There's one more that I was going to mention here, which is kind of just the religious diversity that we have in America. And we see, I mean, our country is made up of countless different types of religions. Obviously, we're one of the biggest countries in the world, or most populated. Not obviously, I think China exceeds our population, and there might be, maybe, I don't know if that's the only one, but the United States is one of the biggest, most powerful countries in the world, and it's made up of many different religious adherents. There's not any restriction on any of those religions, of people being able to identify as those religions or anything like that. So you can be a Muslim, you can be a Jew, you can be a Christian, a Buddhist, an atheist, whatever you choose to be in America, and you won't get punished or incriminated for that or anything. And so the U.S. government protects all religions equally, including non-religion or atheism. So with all of that being said, do you think that it's, what should we say is the answer on, is America a Christian nation or not? Well, I personally would say no, it is not a Christian nation, and it was never a Christian nation. Now, while a nation, while America could be definitely heavily influenced by Christianity, just because of the influence that it has on America, and because we have a lot of religious traditions baked into our society and our culture, does not make us a Christian nation inherently. And but we still could, that still doesn't necessarily mean that America is anti-Christian or anti-religion or atheistic or anything like that. It just means that America is, the American government, based on the Constitution, as long as we hold to that Constitution, is it is a religiously neutral nation under the government with our current Constitution. Now, that could change, you never know, with Christian nationalism is taking a huge rise right now, especially under the presidency of Trump. So we don't know. I'm not particularly worried that the Constitution will be changed to not be able to protect religious freedoms, or to start enforcing any kind of religion, but it does become a little bit scary when Christian nationalists, when they start to be more confident and be more bold in their steps towards trying to make America more into a like a church ran, like where they try to mix the church and the state. Anytime you mix church and state, it doesn't end well. We're going to get into that in just a minute. But just because we share certain traditions, just because America shares certain traditions and things like that and history with Christianity, doesn't necessarily mean that it is a Christian nation. Now, I just want to ask this question too, kind of in closing. What if the United States were inherently Christian? What if Christianity was the national religion? And what if it was enforced? If the church had like legal authority to enforce its laws and its rules in our society, and the government was, or the government was controlling what the church was allowed to preach and teach and things like that. Well, that is a scary thought. And there were societies, and there might still be some, but there were some societies that were like ran almost like by the church, by what they would consider to be a Christian government. And we might talk about that in a future episode about what some of these societies look like. But one example that probably everyone knows is the example of the Roman Empire, which originally it was more pagan, what we would consider pagan today. Probably those who practice pagan religions wouldn't consider themselves to be pagan. They might consider others to be. But and pagan essentially is just a term that means like not a majority view, like more of a fringe type of religious view or something like that. It's kind of a derogatory term. So it's just basically a derogatory way of saying like a less, more fringe version of religion. And but anyway, so yeah, even though the Roman Empire was probably started out a little bit more pagan with like the the old Greek and Roman mythology and stuff like that, where they worshipped some of these different Greek and Roman gods and stuff like that. Well, later in the third century AD, with Constantine, then Christianity, or Roman Catholicism, whichever one you want to call it, became the national religion of the Roman Empire. They probably would have said that it was Christianity. But then I have to say Roman Catholicism, because I know some Christians are going to say, well, Roman Catholics aren't really Christians. So, you have to clarify things for certain people. So, but anyway, they consider themselves to be, they made like Christianity the national religion of the Roman Empire, and they persecuted those who disagreed with them. They persecuted heretics and things like that. And lots of people think that only the Roman Catholic Church did this, but that's not only the case with them. Also, there were some Protestant groups that did this too. Like if you look at the government which was largely influenced under the rule of John Calvin in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, maybe he wasn't like the Pope of that town or the dictator or anything, but he definitely had a large influence in the leadership of that area, of that city, whenever he lived there. And it was almost like, it wasn't necessarily a theocracy, but it was a church-ran government, ran by John Calvin's church and by the Protestant church. And they would kind of do the same thing that the Catholics did, of persecuting people and condemning heretics, except they would sometimes be known for executing Catholics and things like that if they came in and were causing trouble and challenging their doctrines and things like that. So it's interesting stuff. A lot of people think that, oh, it would be a utopia if our country was ran by the church, but no, it would not be. It would be like the worst kind of post-apocalyptic dystopian type of novel or movie that you've ever read or ever watched. So think about that for a little bit. But yeah, America is not a Christian nation. I think I can say that with pretty strong, pretty high confidence that we're not a Christian nation. And that doesn't mean that Christianity is bad. It doesn't mean that, and I don't think that it would be a good thing. But I don't think that it would be a good thing for Christianity and the government to mix, and for us to become like a Christian empire. That's anytime, like I said, anytime religion and politics merge, it's just a messy situation. Anyway, I'm probably going to go ahead and end the video there, but I just want to thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe and give your feedback, and I will see you next time. God bless.